They accumulate in our cup holders, clutter our dresser tops, and get tossed into jars we never seem to empty. The humble penny, America's lowest value coin, has become more of a nuisance than a useful form of currency for most Americans. Yet for decades, we continued to mint billions of them every year. We've all been there, holding up the checkout line while we search for exact change or watching someone else do the same. Perhaps you're one of the millions who simply decline to pick up pennies found on the ground because they're not worth the effort of bending over. In 1857, the United States discontinued the half-cent coin because it had too little purchasing power to be useful. Yet that half-cent, adjusted for inflation, would be worth about 15 cents today, 15 times more valuable than our current penny. Here's a startling fact that finally led to action. Each penny costs about 3.7 cents to produce in 2024. Yes, you read that correctly. The US Mint lost money on every penny it created. In 2024 alone, penny production cost American taxpayers about $85 million. Many advanced economies have already eliminated their lowest denomination coins without issue. Canada discontinued its penny in 2013. Australia hasn't had 1 cent coin since 1992. New Zealand, Finland, the Netherlands, the list of countries that have successfully moved on from their smallest coins continues to grow. And now, after decades of debate, the United States has finally joined them. In May 2025, the US Treasury Department confirmed that it had placed its final order for penny blanks and would cease production once that inventory is exhausted, expected to occur in early 2026. The decision represents a victory for economic rationality over inertia and sentiment. Today, we're examining the overwhelming case that led to this decision, what it means for everyday Americans, and how the transition to a penny-free economy is already underway. Act 1, a costly coin and the decision to end it. Let's start with the economics that finally forced action. In 2024, the United States Mint produced more than 3.2 billion pennies. That's 57.5% of all coins produced that year. Each one costs approximately 3.7 cents to manufacture and distribute. This wasn't always the case. Prior to 1982, pennies were made primarily of copper. But as copper prices rose, the metal content became worth more than the face value of the coin. To address this, the mint changed the composition to 97.5% zinc with a thin copper coating.
Surprised you didn't know that.
Yet, even with this cheaper formulation, the production costs continue to rise above the penny's face value, creating what economists call negative seigniorage. The government loses money on each coin it produces. The situation worsened dramatically as zinc prices more than doubled since 2000. Dr. James Witt, professor of economics at Georgetown University, explains, most currency is supposed to generate positive seigniorage. The difference between the face value and the production cost should be profit for the government. The penny has become a consistent money loser, essentially a taxpayer subsidy for a coin that fewer people use meaningfully each year. The numbers became impossible to ignore. According to US Mint annual records, the government lost over $1.5 billion on penny production over 20 years, with losses accelerating in recent years. In fiscal year 2024 alone, the loss was $85.3 million. In February 2025, President Donald Trump addressed the issue directly in a social media post. For far too long, the United States has minted pennies, which literally cost us more than 2 cents. This is so wasteful. I have instructed my Secretary of the U.S. Treasury to stop producing new pennies. Let's rip the waste out of our great nation's budget, even if it's a penny at a time. By May 2025, the Treasury Department made it official. They had placed their final order for penny blanks and would cease production once existing inventory is exhausted. The U.S. Mint estimates this decision will save approximately $56 million annually in direct production costs. Beyond direct production costs, there were substantial indirect costs that influenced the decision. Zinc must be mined, refined, and shipped. The coins must be distributed to banks nationwide. Businesses must count, roll, and transport them, all for a coin that many people immediately stored in jars rather than used for transactions. There's also an environmental dimension. Zinc mining and refining have significant environmental impacts, including habitat disruption, energy consumption, and potential water pollution. Eliminating penny production reduces this environmental footprint. For businesses, pennies created inefficiencies through added transaction times and processing costs. The National Association of Convenience Stores estimates that handling pennies adds about 2 to 2.5 seconds per cash transaction. Multiply that by billions of transactions annually, and we're talking about millions of hours of lost productivity. Jeff Leonard, a spokesman for the National Association of Convenience Stores, supported the decision. Convenience stores sell a lot of products, but what they really sell is speed of service. Eliminating the need to handle pennies directly serves that goal. Act 2, the shrinking value. When the half cent was eliminated in 1857, it had more purchasing power than the dime does today. The penny's usefulness had similarly eroded through inflation, making the decision to discontinue production long overdue. In 1900, a penny could buy a small candy bar or a postcard. In 1950, it could still purchase a piece of gum. Today, there is literally nothing you can buy with a single penny. It exists solely as a make-weight for other denominations. Economic historian Dr. Sarah Llewellyn puts this in perspective. The penny has become a vestigial denomination. When people deposited pennies in penny arcades or purchased penny candies, the coin served a genuine economic purpose. Today, it's essentially a rounding error in most transactions. Inflation continues to erode the penny's already minimal value. By some projections, by 2050, if production had continued, a penny would have the purchasing power that 1/10 of a penny has today, which is to say virtually none at all. This diminished value led to adaptive behavior. Many businesses already price their products to avoid penny usage. Think of the prevalence of prices ending in 0.95 or 0.99. Some retailers, like gift shops and national parks or airport stores, had already implemented penny-free pricing, rounding to the nearest nickel with no consumer complaints. The behavioral evidence was clear. Most Americans didn't value pennies enough to use them efficiently. Studies suggested that about 80% of pennies were used exactly once before being placed in storage. An estimated $10 billion in pennies, approximately 114 billion coins, are currently sitting idle in American households. The Treasury Department described these coins as severely underutilized. The ubiquitous take a penny, leave a penny trays found at many checkout counters spoke volumes about the coin's perceived value. We treated pennies almost as communal property rather than currency with meaningful worth, something that doesn't happen with nickels, dimes, or quarters. Act 3, what the end of penny production means for you. Now that penny production has been discontinued, what does this mean for everyday Americans? The transition is more straightforward than many anticipated, and it's already beginning. First and foremost, it's crucial to understand what is not happening. Pennies are not being recalled or removed from circulation. They remain legal tender indefinitely. If you have pennies, you can still use them. If someone pays you with pennies, you must legally accept them. Banks will continue to accept penny deposits. However, with approximately 114 billion pennies in circulation and no new ones being produced, the supply available for change-making will gradually dwindle. The Federal Reserve has announced that it will continue distributing pennies from its inventory to banks on a weekly basis. When the inventory at a specific Federal Reserve location is depleted, that location will cease fulfilling orders for pennies. Here's what this means for cash transactions. Once retailers run out of ready access to pennies, they will need to round cash transactions to the nearest nickel. This is the same system successfully used in Canada, Australia, and numerous other countries. The rounding works as follows. If your total ends in 1 or 2 cents, it rounds down to the nearest 0. If it ends in 3 or 4 cents, it rounds up to 5. If it ends in 6 or 7 cents, it rounds down to 5. And if it ends in 8 or 9 cents, it rounds up to the next 0. For example, a purchase totaling $5.22 would be rounded down to $5.20. A purchase totaling $7.78 would be rounded up to $7.80. A purchase totaling $12.43 would be rounded up to $12.45, and a purchase totaling $9.97 would be rounded down to $9.95. Critically, this rounding only applies to the final total of cash transactions. Individual items can still be priced at any amount. Electronic payments, credit cards, debit cards, mobile payments, checks, will continue to process exact amounts to the penny. Your bank account balance will still track every cent. According to the National Retail Federation, which represents most major U.S. store chains, retailers' primary goal is making this transition as seamless as possible for customers. Dylan Gian, Senior Director of Government Relations for the NRF, stated, "Retailers' primary goal is serving customers and making this transition as seamless as possible." Most retailers are expected to continue accepting pennies even after penny supplies at banks begin to run short, honoring the principle that, as Jeff Leonard of the National Association of Convenience Stores puts it, never lose a customer over a penny. If a customer wants to pay with pennies, most retailers will accommodate them. However, when giving change, retailers will begin rounding once their penny supplies are depleted. The transition timeline is somewhat uncertain because it depends on how quickly the existing inventory is used. With 114 billion pennies in circulation, many retailers may not experience penny shortages for months or even years. The transition will happen gradually, not all at once, giving businesses and consumers time to adjust. Some retailers may proactively begin rounding even before their penny supplies are exhausted to streamline operations. Others may continue using pennies as long as they're available. This variation is entirely normal and mirrors what happened in other countries during their transition. Act 4. Implications for retailers and businesses. For retailers and businesses, the end of penny production requires some preparation, but the changes are manageable. Point-of-sale systems will need to be updated to incorporate rounding rules for cash transactions. Most modern systems can implement this change with a simple software update. Some businesses have already begun this process in anticipation of depleting penny supplies. Cash drawers will eventually be reconfigured to remove the penny compartment, simplifying the change-making process and potentially reducing counting errors. Cashiers report that in countries that have eliminated their smallest coins, transactions are faster and simpler. Businesses will need to train staff on the rounding system and how to communicate it to customers. However, the system is straightforward enough that most customers grasp it immediately. The Canadian experience showed that initial concerns about customer confusion disappeared within weeks of implementation. One complexity involves sales tax collection. The Treasury Department has indicated it will be up to the state and local governments to provide guidance to retailers on how to accurately collect sales taxes under the new rounding system. Some jurisdictions may need to adjust their tax calculation methods to ensure proper revenue collection while maintaining the rounding to the nickel system. Banks face their own transition challenges. While the Federal Reserve will continue distributing pennies while inventory lasts, community banks have reported disruptions in penny availability even before the production officially ceased. The Independent Community Bankers of America called for a formal phase-out plan to help financial institutions manage the transition more smoothly. However, banks will continue to accept penny deposits indefinitely, and customer account balances will continue to be tracked to the cent regardless of the cash rounding system. Act 5. Psychology and historical attachment. If the economic case was so clear, why did it take so long to discontinue penny production? Part of the answer lies in psychological and historical attachment. The penny features Abraham Lincoln, one of America's most revered presidents. Some argued that eliminating the penny would dishonor Lincoln's legacy, though supporters of penny elimination quickly pointed out that Lincoln also appears on the $5 bill, which remains in circulation. There's also cultural attachment. Phrases like, "a penny for your thoughts," "penny wise and pound foolish," and "find a penny, pick it up all day long, you'll have good luck," have embedded the penny in our national psyche. Beyond sentiment, there were powerful special interests invested in penny production. The primary beneficiary was the zinc industry, as modern pennies are 97.5% zinc. Hardened zinc products, later known as Artisan, the primary supplier of penny blanks to the US Mint, actively lobbied against penny elimination. The industry even helped fund Americans for Common Sense, an organization that advocated for keeping the penny. Their arguments typically emphasize the historical significance and the potential impact on charities that collected pennies. Dr. Rachel Melton, a consumer psychologist, explains another dimension. Humans have a general aversion to loss. Even though eliminating the penny would be economically rational, it feels like something is being taken away. This triggers a stronger emotional response than the logical arguments for elimination can overcome. There was also the matter of political will. Few elected officials wanted to be remembered as the person who killed the penny. It was easier to maintain the status quo than to advocate for a change that might generate short-term criticism, even if the long-term benefits were clear. Ultimately, it took mounting financial losses and presidential action to overcome these obstacles. Act 6. The charity argument revisited. One common argument for keeping the penny involved charity. Organizations like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's Pennies for Patients program and Ronald McDonald House's penny collection efforts raised millions through penny donations. James Harding, director of community fundraising for a national charity, made this case. People don't mind donating pennies because individually they're of little value, but collectively they add up to meaningful amounts for worthy causes. However, research from countries that eliminated their lowest denomination coins suggests this concern is misplaced. In every case, charities successfully adapted their messaging to focus on the next lowest denomination. Canadian charity executive Diane Morissette shared her experience. Initially, we were concerned, but we found that when people couldn't give pennies anymore, they often rounded up to nickels or dimes. Our Small Change Big Impact campaign actually saw a 15% increase in total donations after the penny was discontinued. Moreover, charitable giving is increasingly moving digital. Apps, text-to-give campaigns, and online donations are replacing physical coin collections as the primary channel for small donations. Many retailers now offer electronic roundup programs where customers can choose to round their purchase to the nearest dollar, with the difference going to the charity. These programs have proven even more effective than physical coin collection. For American charities, the end of penny production will likely drive innovation in fundraising methods rather than reducing donations. The nickel becomes the new penny for donation programs, and digital alternatives continue to expand. Act 7. The international experience. The United States is not pioneering uncharted territory by ending penny production. Numerous countries have successfully discontinued their lowest value coins, and their experiences offer valuable lessons. Australia eliminated its 1 and 2 cent coins in 1992. New Zealand followed in 2006. Canada discontinued its penny in 2013. Finland, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Italy all eliminated small denomination coins when they adopted the euro. More recently, Sweden, Denmark, and Hungary have all removed their smallest coins from circulation. I barely remember when we had 1 cent coin, says Australian shopper Michael Thornton. Nobody misses them. The system works perfectly fine without them. In every case, the transition was smoother than anticipated. After a brief adjustment period, consumers and businesses adapted to the new system without significant issues. Fears about inflation, charity impacts, or consumer backlash proved unfounded. Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney described their penny elimination as a complete success with minimal disruption and significant savings. Similar assessments have come from central bankers across countries that have taken the step. Cash registers in these countries were simply reconfigured to exclude the eliminated denomination. Cashiers reported faster transactions and fewer errors without the smallest coins to handle. Perhaps most telling, consumer satisfaction surveys from these countries show that once the transition is complete, the vast majority of people prefer the simplified currency system. In Australia, a 5-year follow-up study found that 80% of consumers consider the elimination of 1 and 2 cent coins to be a positive change. The Canadian experience is particularly relevant to the United States given the similarity of the two economies. Canada's penny was eliminated in 2013, and the transition proved remarkably smooth. The Royal Canadian Mint estimated savings of about $11 million annually from discontinuing penny production. Inflation remained stable, consumer satisfaction was high, and businesses adapted quickly. Canadian retail consultant Margaret Wilson shares her observations. There was some initial concern about consumer reaction, but it disappeared almost immediately. Within weeks, it was as if the penny had never existed. Cashiers appreciate the simplified process, and consumers don't miss having pennies in their pockets. Act 8. Looking ahead. The decision to discontinue penny production marks the end of an era. The penny has been part of American life since 1793, when the first copper cents were struck at the newly established U.S. Mint. For most of that history, the penny played a vital role in everyday commerce. But currencies, like all tools, must evolve to remain useful. The half cent, large cent, 2 cent, and 3 cent coins all served their purpose and were discontinued when they no longer made economic sense. The penny has now reached that same point. The transition will happen gradually over the coming months and years as the existing supply of 114 billion pennies is slowly depleted from commercial circulation. Rounding to the nearest nickel will become the norm for cash transactions. Electronic transactions will continue tracking every cent. Bank accounts will continue showing exact balances. The experiences of other nations demonstrate that this will be a non-event for most Americans after a brief adjustment period. Cash transactions will be marginally faster. Government resources, $56 million annually in direct savings, will be preserved. Environmental impacts from zinc mining will be reduced. Some practical considerations remain. The 2024 and 2025 pennies, being the final years of production, may have increased value for collectors. Those with large quantities of pennies may want to gradually deposit them at banks or use them for purchases while they're still readily accepted. And there's the question of what comes next. The nickel, which cost 13.78 cents to produce in fiscal year 2024, faces the same negative seigniorage problem. Some economists suggest that eliminating both the penny and the nickel would make economic sense, leaving the dime as the lowest denomination. However, that's a debate for another day. But for now, the decision to discontinue penny production represents a triumph of economic rationality over inertia. Economists across the political spectrum, from liberal to conservative, nearly unanimously agreed that eliminating the penny was sensible policy. Former Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin, President Barack Obama, and numerous members of Congress from both parties advocated for this change over the years. In April 2025, Representatives Lisa McClain and Robert Garcia introduced the Common Sense Act, bipartisan legislation to formalize the end of penny production and establish the rounding system for cash transactions. While the Treasury's action may proceed without formal legislation, such a legal bill would provide additional legal clarity and structure to the transition. Our attachment to the penny was understandable. It's been a constant presence in American pockets for generations. But sometimes the most rational decision is to move forward, adapting our currency system to the economic realities of the 21st century. The discontinuation of penny production isn't just about saving $56 million annually, though that's a significant benefit. It's about eliminating an inefficiency that consumed time, resources, and energy for minimal benefit. It's about recognizing that a coin that costs 3.7 cents to produce and has virtually no purchasing power no longer serves its intended purpose. The penny served America well for over 2 centuries, but its time has passed. The decision to discontinue production was absolutely the right thing to do. Sometimes the most sensible changes are the hardest to make, but in the case of the penny, it truly was a no-brainer, and America has finally decided to act on it.